Rogers here with Rogers Aviation NW or Northwest, and I operate a tailwheel school along with upset prevention recovery training, spin training for CFI candidates, and I also do a little bit of aerobatic instruction. I do all of this in association with Old Time Aviation. We both operate out of Bremerton Airport, KPWT in the state of Washington. This video's intent is for new clients who want to come to me and do some tailwheel training to give them just an overview of what the training's going to be like and what to expect. So I want to start off real quick just talking about three big differences between tricycle landing gear airplanes and tailwheel airplanes. The first significant difference here, and it's my little training aid, is that the center of gravity for any tailwheel airplane is going to be behind the landing gear. So you have these landing gear here, and so the center of gravity is back here. With a tricycle landing gear aircraft, the center of gravity is in front of the main landing gear. This causes some interesting effects when you're trying to land a tailwheel airplane. Let me start off with what you're probably familiar with most often is the tricycle landing gear airplane. If you are attempting to land the airplane and you have a little bit of a drift, maybe you're not pointed straight down the runway, when you touch down, because the center of gravity is in front of the wheels, the airplane will tend to straighten itself out. So it'll help and aid your landing and get you going straight down the runway. It's just the opposite with a tailwheel airplane. With the center of gravity behind the wheels, if you touch down with a little bit of drift or you touch down at an angle, it's going to tend to cause you to get even more sideways to the runway because the center of gravity is going to try and flow forward. The big point here is that these landing gear here on my model, if you get that center of gravity outside of these landing gear, then the airplane's going to go completely on around, and that's called a ground loop. So the key point with tailwheel aircraft is to keep that center of gravity between these landing gear and flowing straight down the runway, and you do that with rudder, and you do that with a side slip, if you will, on the runway if you have a little bit of a crosswind. We'll go into that a little bit more in detail, but that's one of the big significant differences between a tricycle landing gear and a tailwheel airplane. The other obvious difference between tricycle and tailwheel aircraft is the tailwheel. And if you can imagine going out and landing, you probably heard 100 times from your tricycle landing gear instructor, hold it off, hold it off. And what they're telling you to do is to increase the angle of attack of the aircraft to create more and more lift as the airplane goes slower and slower in the flare, letting you kind of touch down smoothly. That correction, that holding it off like that and increasing the angle of attack, is a correction for accidentally flaring too high. And so in tailwheel instruction, what we're going to do is teach you how to flare precisely at the right altitude, because you can't hold it off in a tailwheel airplane. The tailwheel is not structured or stressed for touchdowns. So you can't touch down on the tailwheel. You can't over-rotate, touch down on the tailwheel, and then plop the main gear down. So there's a finite amount that you can flare, and that is the 3-point attitude. That's it. That's all the flare you get in a tricycle or in a tailwheel aircraft. Because of that, backing it up on final, you're going to have to fly a very precise speed on final, and you're going to have to begin that flare at a very precise point in order to be able to rotate the aircraft into the flare and right into the 3-point attitude and still touch down in a 3-point attitude just above the stall speed. So you can see it requires, tailwheel instruction requires a great deal more finesse. It requires more attention, and it requires you to be very accurate with your pattern and the flare and the control of the aircraft going straight down the runway. So you're coordinating 3 things as you come into that flare. Keeping that nose pointed straight down the runway, not allowing any drift, not touching down sideways, flaring at a very precise altitude and a very precise speed. So I've got a video here of me flying with one of my students, Hans Alder, and he graciously allowed me to use this video to make some points and talk to you a little bit about what to expect when you jump in the plane and try and do a tailwheel conversion. All right, we're going to just let the recording play, and I'll make some comments along the way.
Center forward with full throttle. Okay. Okay, keep it coming forward a little bit more forward. Get your nose up like that. Okay.
Meant get your nose down. We're raising the tail and lowering the nose to the climb attitude and letting the airplane fly off the ground.
All right, so what you're going to want to do is to fly your base about where the movie theater is over there. Okay, that's, yeah, well, no, just past the white building's a movie theater. See the movie theater? Yeah, drive-in, yeah. Okay. So just before you get to turning your base, you'll pull the power back, you'll put the carb heat on, and then you'll slow it up to 70 before you begin your descent.
All right, the idea here is that we want to turn our base 45 degrees off the touchdown point on the runway. We don't want to go any further out than a mile. We should be flying a half to a mile in our pattern. But I give visual reference points for clients so that it makes it a little bit easier for them to figure out where to turn, coming up on a visual reference point when they're first learning how to fly the airplane and learning how to do tailwheel at the same time.
The more time you can be clearing for traffic.
10 miles to the east, get vector around for the visual 20.
Okay, you want to be at 70, not any less. Yeah, I'm at 70. Okay, and we're gonna, because we kind of extended out a little bit far, we're gonna be a little low, but let's see how things work out on final. Okay. Yeah, clear right. Yep. Good. Bremerton traffic, lose recovery of final runway 20. Bremerton traffic. Bremerton traffic. All right, now we're all lined up. I want you to get yourself lined up going straight down that runway. Okay. As best as you can, holding 70 to 65. 70 to 65, anywhere in that neighborhood. Yeah, this is going to work out just about right. Now, right now, you can see that we're pointed to the right. There we go. Now we're pointed down the runway a little bit better. Okay, and we have the wings are not quite level. You've got your left wing is low, but there's just a very slight crosswind, so we don't need that much wing low. So now I want you to get back on the center line, and then start your flare, get your wings level, flare, hold it off. Now, 3-point attitude right there. Hold it off right there. Okay, and hold the
Right.
all the way aft.
In tailwheel operations, I already mentioned that in tricycle landing gear, you'll hear your instructor say, hold it off, and he's actually trying to get you to change your attitude of the aircraft to increase the angle of attack. In tailwheel, we'll still use that same term, holding it off, but what I'm trying to get you to do is just to maintain the 3-point attitude. As the airplane slows down, the nose is going to want to drop, and you're going to have to increase the back pressure to maintain the same attitude, not increase the angle of attack.
You're doing a good base. This is perfect. Nice turn. Notice how you're in a bank. Notice things. All right. Yep. Notice how you're in a kind of a little bit of a turn here. So don't turn until you want to, and keep your wings level until you want to turn. Okay. Now you can start to turn. There you go.
What I want people to do is to spend less time in their turn. Go ahead and use a full 30 degrees of bank, get into the turn, get out of it so that you can clear better when you're not in the turn.
It's not going to turn unless you turn. If you could fly this airplane with wing low like that, and it's not going to turn. So you just need to keep your rudder centered. And all right, there you go. Good air.
What I was trying to say is it needs back pressure to turn. You can roll the wings into a bank and it'll stay there all day. You got to use a little back pressure to actually make the airplane turn.
Now you're pointed down the runway. You're at 60. It's 65. This is perfect. No power should be on. And then you begin right about there. Start your round out. Keep the nose going straight. Now flare a little bit. Keep the flare up and right into the 3-point attitude. Nope, that's good. Right like that. Just hold it like that and slow down. There you go. Now keep the nose going straight. Let it slow down by itself. Carb heat in. Full throttle. And now go ahead and go around. Full throttle and stick coming forward.
One of the things that we are deaf on is using brakes on the runway. More ground loops, yeah, there's a little gyroscopic effect issue there, but more ground loops occur in general aviation because people are using brakes on the runway.
Remember, there's a lot of gyroscopic effect when you move that throttle, when you move that nose down. You're going to have to feed in some right rudder to keep that thing from going to the left.
Okay, I paused the video there for a second and I backed it up to just before I started talking before where he had that directional control issue, and I want to talk about that a little bit. I mentioned before about gyroscopic effect, and so you'll see that effect in this video because the nose came down rapidly and it caused a large left turning tendency that he needed to use the rudder to correct. And so he gets better at it throughout the video, but I want to just see that one more time here.
Go ahead and go around, full throttle, and stick coming forward. And as the nose comes up, remember you're going to have that gyroscopic effect. So get the nose up in the air, please. There we go.
Okay. I thought I had overcorrected going right, and then it came in.
Yeah, remember there's a lot of gyroscopic effect when you move that throttle, when you move that nose down. You're going to have to feed in some right rudder to keep that thing from going to the left. Okay. So you just need to kind of program your brain for that.
Yeah, I didn't feel good about that. The final idea.
Yeah, the biggest problem is keeping the nose tracking straight down the runway and keeping the wings as level as you possibly can.
There's a real problem in tailwheel operations when people transition to a stick aircraft. They rest their arm on the stick, and so they end up in a right bank all the time if they're right-handed. Same thing happens when you go to flare, is you pull back to the right instead of breaking your wrist and bringing it straight back. We're doing a little slip here to loosen altitude.
Now we're going to have to get, now that we're down, we have to get back over to the runway and line it up. All right, you've got the airplane about 65 miles an hour now. See if you can keep it straight down the runway and wings level. And now start the flare. You're pointing to the left, right rudder. There we go. Up, nose up to the 3-point attitude. There you go. Good. Left rudder to keep going straight. Now, once you have it under control, okay, make sure it's going straight down the runway. Now do the carb heat. Okay, straight down the runway. Okay, you got to get it straight down the runway on the center line. All right. Now, once you're going straight down the runway, remember when the nose comes up or down, I should say, you're going to have to use a little right rudder. So let's get the power in.
Get my up and down backwards.
Okay, and as that nose comes up, don't be surprised.
Down.
There you go. Now rotate, take off. There you go.
That was a little better. Affirmative traffic, lose recovery, final 2-0. Affirmative traffic.
Okay, now see if you can get yourself lined up just like we talked about. A little bit fast here. So what happens is when you let yourself get fast on base and stuff, then you end up being high and fast down here. But we're doing okay. We're going to come down. It'll be fine. This is much better. You're lined up. Now your wings are staying level. This is it. Just hold it like this until we get ready to flare.
Okay.
And now as we start to flare, start the round out. Now let it slow down. Now bring it right into the 3-point attitude. 3-point attitude, right up a little bit more. A little more. Keep it going straight. There you go. Now hold the stick all the way back and let it slow down. Carb heat and power. And now just slowly bring it up. Keep that nose going straight down the runway. Up like that. Woo. Power all the way in.
Okay.
There you go. It's a rodeo. So you want to get that nose, you need to get the nose up a little bit sooner, okay?
Okay.
You need to use a little bit more forward pressure. Keep your nose up there. All right. Now you're at 70 and you're at your turn point, so you can go. And hold 70, but keep that nose up for 70. Yeah. I'm gonna be picky here.
Okay.
There
I'm
it is.
at 71.
Yep, I see it. I see it. All right. You're doing good. All right, just hold that pitch for your 70. Trim it if you have to. Okay, roll out doing 90 degrees to the runway. You're good. Keep the nose up a little bit. Sometimes when you roll out, you actually have to pitch up just a little bit because you're not, you don't want to be below 70 though for the turn. Okay. There you go. Now you start your turn. Much better, much better.
Bremerton traffic, please top rail final, runway 20, Bremerton traffic.
Now, pitch the nose up for 65 and see if you can hold 65 all the way down final. This is good. Yeah, there's 65. Now it'll come back down again. There you go. Now, line that nose up and keep that thing going straight down the runway as best you can with 65 miles an hour. Okay. Nose needs to come down just a little bit. There you go. Okay. Maybe a little bit of power. There you go. Now you can bring the power back to idle. Okay. Keep the nose going straight. 3-point attitude. 3-point attitude. A little bit higher. There you go. Hold it. Just freeze it. Okay. Keep the nose going straight. I'm kind of helping a little bit. Keep that stick all the way back. We're going to full stop this thing. We're not going to use the brakes. We're going to take this opportunity to do a little taxiing on the runway too. Okay.
Okay, we want to taxi with the stick full aft, and we do not want to use brakes on the runway. We want to just let the thing slow down. That is what causes a lot of ground loops, is people hitting the brakes on the runway and getting that center of gravity, getting the tail wheel out between the two mains.
Don't cut too close. You get kind of you're going to go on the grass here with the right tire. There you go. Good. Stay on the center line as best you can.
Okay, well, there's the video. Let me talk about 3 more things very quickly here so I don't keep this video too long. I want to talk about takeoff technique. I want to talk about basically using brakes on the runway and not using them, I should say. And then flying the airplane to a stop. So let's start off here with, there are 3 schools of thought on takeoffs in a tailwheel airplane. The first one many people teach is that you start rolling down the runway in a 3-point attitude, obviously. You pick the tail up by pushing forward on the stick, but you go all the way to a level attitude as you're rolling down the runway on the mains. This causes some complications. One of them is that it requires a great deal more finesse on the rudder as you're creating gyroscopic effect and P-factor decreasing as you lower the nose. All of those things add up to directional control issues. The reason that many instructors teach this is in order to give you a better view down the runway so that you can see better as you're going down the runway. There's a lot of instructors who are sitting in the back seat of a Citabria. They want the nose down so that they can see down the runway. But it does cause the directional control problems, and it causes one other characteristic, and that is that it's a two-step takeoff. You have to lower the nose to level flight, get speed, then you have to rotate in order to get into a climb. All right, the second school of thought is to just stay in the three-point attitude, roll all the way down the runway in the three-point attitude, and just let the airplane fly off the ground. The problems with that technique, it's going to be very similar to a soft field technique in a tricycle landing gear airplane, in that the airplane's going to get airborne before it's ready to fly. And in many of tailwheel aircraft, you're going to have to very abruptly get the stick forward as you get airborne in order to keep into ground effect and accelerate out to take off. Makes it kind of hard to first do something pretty aggressive like that and learn how to fly tailwheel and a new airplane all at the same time. But it is a technique that a lot of people use to avoid the gyroscopic effect issues and directional control issues. What I ask my clients to do is a little bit in between both of those. What I want you to do is to get rolling down the runway, you add full power, and as you do, you come forward on the stick. You'll feel kind of a neutral pocket on the stick. Once you get to that neutral pocket, then you're just going to ease a little bit further forward, lowering the nose, raising the tail, and you raise the tail, lowering the nose to just the climb attitude. Well, you won't know what that is at first, but once you gain an idea of what the climb attitude, in the Citabria, we climb out 70 to 75 miles an hour. So as that nose comes down to the climb attitude, then you just freeze it and let it fly off at that climb attitude. Now you don't have to change your pitch after you get airborne. If you do it slowly, you have very minimal gyroscopic effect issues. You can keep that airplane going straight down the runway. And the only thing there is that when you do taxi out onto the runway and make that 90-degree turn, clear the runway before you do that. If you are in an airplane, of course, that you can't see over the nose. All right, brakes. We're just absolutely death on brakes on the runway. There's no reason to use brakes in a tailwheel airplane on the runway. You want to just, after you land, you want to get that stick full aft to plant yourself on the ground and continue down the runway as straight as you can using no brakes and just let the airplane roll. Once you get down to a safe taxi speed, then of course you can exit the runway. Most ground loops that occur in general aviation are as a result of somebody stepping on a brake a little bit too hard on the runway at a fast speed. That's really, most every single ground loop starts that way. So we want to eliminate that whole process and just stay off the brakes altogether. And then I guess the last thing I want to just close up this video with is the concept that in a tailwheel airplane, you got to fly this thing to a stop. You might have noticed in the video, we're still talking about directional control, staying straight down the runway right at the end, just before he turned off the runway. And it's because it's still at higher speeds, even higher taxi speeds, you're going to have some directional control issues because, again, what's happening? The airplane is taxiing with the nose in the air, and you actually get P factor at higher speeds in the taxi. Wind gusts, turns, all of those things affect the airplane greatly. And as I mentioned before, if you get that center of gravity out on the other side of these wheels by getting the tail wheel out on the other side of those wheels, you can very easily get the airplane doing a ground loop. So you've got to fly the airplane to a stop and fly it to the taxi. And then you should have pretty good success with tailwheel. So thanks again for sticking with this. When we get to the end, if you wouldn't mind hitting like, maybe subscribe to the channel, give me some comments. Let me know whether you like or dislike the video. Appreciate it very much. Thanks again for joining us today.